Noticed. People are what make big cities big. They crowd the streets, squeeze into subways, and make my daily routine of commute work commute a nightmare. I really dislike human interaction. I've struggled with social anxiety since childhood. Sometimes I wonder why I work for a big company in an even bigger city. I hate the fact that I can't talk to anyone without planning something to say beforehand. So to save neurons and time, I just avoid eye contact in conversations with my fellow employees and subway riders. Today, though, was a rare event, worthy of documentation. The only time I've really been grateful for my reluctance to speak to strangers and for the bodies clogging the roads and walkways of spectacularly undersized sardine tin city. Sounds harsh, but after what I saw earlier today, I just really need to vent. I'm probably going to be screwed later, anyway. The numbers, the people, are ticking down, and I won't be able to hide behind them anymore. My subway station is always packed with people, and I've seen them all before. One of my strengths is observation. Even though I don't like talking to these people, I notice them every day. For instance, a tall, broad-shouldered man holding a scuffed leather briefcase comes to the station shortly after I do. He usually holds his e-reader way too close to his face and peers at the screen with a pronounced kind of angry squint. He's not obvious or showy about it, it's just a quirk that others usually overlook. However, even those who are completely glued to their phones notice the new guy. 3 weeks ago, I walked down the steps to the subway station to see that someone had set up a little booth in one corner of the station. A big sign with, "Simple Psych Experiment. Quick and easy. I'll pay you," written on it in neat script, sat atop a shelf filled with brochures, which I presumed outlined the details of the experiment. One side of the booth had already been vandalized. It's a big city, what do you expect? And someone had spilled their coffee on the brochure shelf, the brown stain showing up starkly against the white paint. The man in the booth was interesting as well. He wore a rumpled suit, had slightly greasy hair, and looked pretty tired. Definitely not an ideal condition for a Monday morning. Despite his appearance, though, he had a massive, incredibly genuine smile on his face, like he was enjoying every second of his existence, and had been since the day he was born. Good for you, buddy. Good for you. Needless to say, I was incredibly curious about this experiment, but I didn't want to approach him and grab a brochure in case he asked me to participate. Who knows what this guy wants people to do? I sure didn't want to ask. So I did what I do best. I watched. I watched people rush by, pretending not to see him. I watched my usual subway arrive and leave. I watched his grin dwindle as more and more people passed his booth without acknowledging him. My heart leapt when a young woman in the middle of a phone call approached the booth. I'm not sure why she didn't wait to end the call first before approaching him, but I guess she thought she could have 2 conversations at once. She smiled kindly at the man, who immediately matched her grin. "Good morning, miss. Would you like to participate in a quick experiment?" "I'm kinda in the middle of a call right now, but I'd be glad to help you in a second," she replied. "Oh, that's great. No, please continue your call. It's very important that you're distracted while I do this." Her brow now creased in confusion. The woman turned away from him, still on the phone. "Like this?" Again, I wondered why she thought this was a good idea. Being distracted around complete strangers who want to experiment on you? Lovely. Sign me up. "Yes, perfect. Now get back to your conversation. Ignore me." She nodded and started talking again, completely immersed in the conversation within a few moments. 1 second she was trying to peer over her shoulder at the booth, the next she was laughing about some piece of juicy gossip. It was both impressive and a little concerning how quickly she was swept up in the call. I wasn't really watching her, though. I had my eyes trained on the man, now reaching carefully into a paper shopping bag filled with what looked like junk on a shelf beside him. He rummaged around in the bag, eventually choosing something and turning towards the young woman. His gaze swept over me, and I ducked my head, taking my phone out of my pocket to check the time. Almost 7:30. If this guy doesn't hurry up with his magic trick, I'll be late, I thought, I peered back up at the booth over the top of my phone. It didn't look like I missed much. The man held the object over the woman's free hand for a second, then placed it casually in her grasp. I let out a breath I didn't remember holding. It was just a ping-pong ball. She grabbed it almost unconsciously while talking on the phone. The man beamed, ecstatic, and replaced the ball in the woman's hand with a fat wad of money. He turned around to place the ball back in his bag, and struck by curiosity, I jogged over to the shelf, grabbed a pamphlet, and boarded a subway car before he noticed my presence. The thought of the pamphlet in my purse gnawed at me all day. I'd been busy since this morning, so I was relieved when I finally got the chance to read it on the subway home. I pulled it out of my purse and stared at it. The front of the pamphlet was emblazoned with the logo painted on the booth as well as the detailed drawing of an outstretched hand. Nothing much yet. I flipped it open. The inside of the pamphlet claimed that, when sufficiently distracted, humans would grab or let go of items when prompted. I read through a few citations from previous reflex experiments done with babies and skipped the data tables on the middle 3 flaps, flipping the pamphlet over to find a picture of the man in the booth. He smiled up at me, his happiness as evident as ever. Below the picture, he'd typed, "Question: to what extent can this reflex be pushed? Answer: TBD, but you can help me by participating in my experiments. $500 will be given to each participant." $500? The temptation to help him grew even stronger. But what extent did he mean? A size difference? A weight difference? As usual, uncertainty outruled temptation, and I told myself I'd consider participating after I'd seen some variety in his experiments. Unconscious reflexes were a weird thing to test, too, which deepened my worry. After a restless night, I returned to the station as usual. A long line stretched in front of the booth, and the man was positively beaming. Evidently, more people had read the pamphlets and wanted that reward. He tried to yell something over the chatter, but his voice was lost in the hubbub echoing around the station. A few of the people nearest him had heard, though, and started walking away from the booth, apparently spreading his message to other people waiting in line. They too started to disperse. I wondered if the experiment was still on, but I spotted the person who used to be the first in line, an older man, still talking to the man in the booth. The former put on some headphones. The latter rubbed his hands gleefully and rummaged around the bag again. One person per day, I guessed, watching the man in the booth balance a large beach ball in the older man's hands. Over the course of the next few weeks, I watched the man place baseballs, Rubik's cubes, stacks of books, and even a dirty shoe in various hands. The object was different every day, and so was the participant, as no person could participate twice. Everyone knew about the one-person-a-day rule by then, too, so the majority of people stood around in their usual distracted state, playing on their phones or listening to music, while a small group of competitors raced to be first in line. Do I want to be first in line? Every day I asked myself the same question and got the same answer, the safe answer, the answer that would allow me to stay very much within my comfort zone. No. What was the gravity of the situation, though? Surely I'd be fine if I ended up first in line at some point. I constantly told myself, hoping that this would up my confidence. Everyone else had been fine. This morning I woke up confident. I'm not entirely sure why. I'm sure some of you have had the same experience. But I was obscenely happy while I made myself breakfast, changed, and walked to the station. I glanced over at the booth out of habit. No line. My heart skipped a beat. Do I want to be first in line? I started walking quickly across the station, heels clicking loudly on the tiles. Do I want to be first in line? I think I do. I think I do. This might be it, I thought madly. With every step I took, I became more and more certain that I was ready to do this. Do I want to be first in line? I do. I do. This will be it, I chanted to myself. I do. I do. This will be it. I do. I do. This will be it. I do. I do. This will be... A large, meaty hand clutching an e-reader like a lifeline collided with my stomach. I groaned, massaging my side, and I took a step back. Yeah, out of my way, woman, It's my turn." I blinked and reluctantly turned my focus from the booth to the man who had just collided with me. Remember that e-reader guy I described to you earlier? He barged into me in all his squinty glory. To make matters worse, all that confidence I had earlier felt like it had been sucked out of me. "No, wait, you can't. I was going to be there." My voice curled up and died in my throat. E-reader guy laughed. "Like hell you were." He took the remaining strides to the booth and leered at me, a satisfied grin on his stupid face. The man in the booth looked apologetic, but too scared of e-reader guy to do anything. "I'm really sorry, miss. Maybe tomorrow." "Yeah, maybe. Maybe tomorrow." I nodded shakily and went to sit on a bench, trying to scrape together some dignity. I pulled out my phone, but couldn't muster the energy to play a game. Then I remembered e-reader guy. Sure enough, he was immersed in his e-reader as usual, the screen about an inch from his face. I turned my gaze to the man in the booth. He raised his eyebrows in delight, evidently finding what he was looking for, and with a megawatt smile he pulled a small metal shredder out of the bag. "What?" The man in the booth held the shredder up to e-reader guy's hand, threading his fingers into the little nooks and crannies of the metal, and pressed the start button. "No, this can't be right." I leaned forward, trying to see if there was some kind of trick to it. The metal just seemed to be catching e-reader guy's fingers and bumping them up and down. "Oh, thank..." A loud, sickly, deeply wrong crunch. I covered my eyes and tried to block my ears, but the cracking of bone was already echoing in my head. I heard something wet, almost like paste, drop to the floor. My head throbbed. The shredder stopped. A few moments passed before I was brave enough to look up. The man in the booth, thank the stars, was standing in front of e-reader guy and bandaging up his hand, but the tiles were stained red and covered in little pieces of mashed up. Ugh. The smell made me want to vomit. I looked away from the booth into the crowd, searching their usual absent faces. Usual absent what? No one noticed. No one saw the... Shocked, I looked back over at e-reader guy. He still had his nose buried in that stupid e-reader. He hadn't noticed a thing. His hand was gone. I turned around again. No one had seen it. No one. Their phones. Back again. Question. To what extent can this reflex be pushed? Turned around. What's he going to do next? What extent? Back. Who? Turn. I'm really sorry, miss. Maybe tomorrow. Back. I took a breath. I swallowed. I checked my phone. 7:30. I should be going. My brain, overloaded, tried to stick to usual thoughts to keep me going. I stood up, passing the booth on my way to the platform. Once I'd regained some form of composure, I looked over my shoulder. The man in the booth tucked the cash into e-reader guy's stained bandage and grabbed a mop. E-reader guy looked groggy, probably from blood loss. He took a slow step towards the subway. Another step. Another. He fell. Automatically, unconsciously, people walked around him. No one noticed.